இப்போது அமெரிக்க நாட்டின் தமிழ் அறிஞர் திரு ஜான் ஏ லவுட் அவர்கள் எழுதிய த ஸ்டோரி ஆஃப் த டெம்பிள் என்னும் கோயில் புராண நூலினை அமெரிக்காவின் வில்லியம் கல்லூரியின் பேராசிரியர் டாக்டர் சாந்தி பிள்ளை அவர்கள் வெளியிடுவார்கள். அதன் முதல் படியை மொரீஷியஸ் நாட்டில் உள்ள த லீக் என்னும் அமைப்பின் தலைவர் உயர் திரு பாலன் சுப்பிரமணியன் அவர்கள் பெற்றுக்கொள்வார்கள். இப்போது புத்தக வெளியீடு. டாக்டர் சாந்தி பிள்ளை will release the book The Story of the Temple. Mr. Balan Subramaniam will receive the first copy of the Koil Puranam book. Please. Thank you, Dr. Shanthi Pillai and Mr. Balan Subramanian.
Dr. Shanthi Pillai will now review the book, The Story, the Temple, from Dr. John A. Loud.
Today is a significant day in which we celebrate the founding of an institute that is important in the context of Asia. We also recognize the importance of the Institute's efforts to convene the Tamil diaspora. We live in a global era. We must acknowledge the ways in which culture is, as Arjun Appadurai famously identified it, deterritorialized. Tamil people live in so many parts of the world, even for generations, living their culture in creative adaptation to local circumstances, even as they honor its root in Tamil Nadu. Tamil is an ancient language that possesses one of the world's oldest literatures, but it is also a truly global language respected and spoken and read by many people. I'm thinking here of the ways in which the Institute of Asian Studies participates in a constellation of intellectual projects that assert the importance of scholarship not only for the production of knowledge, but also as a project of social justice that seeks to support mutual forms of exchange. In a similar vein, Taiwanese historian Quan-Ching Chen's 2010 book, Asia as Method, argues that cultural studies are not a marginal sphere of intellectual inquiry, but a politically urgent global endeavor. Chen's own area of interest is specifically East Asia. He traces the ways in which the intellectual and subjective work of decolonization began through cultural and scholarly exchanges across nations of the East Asian region, a project that came to be stalled by the Cold War. He calls for the resumption of these reciprocal relations as the groundwork for avoiding the reproduction of European epistemologies, imperial modes of imagination of the world, and neo-colonial structures of economic and military domination. In bringing together research scholars from throughout the Tamil diaspora and from throughout the continent of Asia, the Institute for Asian Studies honors the spirit that Chen claims as urgent, namely one of productive, creative, and supportive dialogue across differences. I commend the Institute for its 43 years as a leader in this endeavor. I also want to commend the Institute for its broad-minded agenda in recognizing the work of scholars of Tamil who do not have Tamil as a mother language. John Lord is one such person. People are often drawn to languages that become mother languages for lifetime projects of research and that support them in expressing creative ideas and also feelings in ways that their first languages do not always do. John Lord was an American scholar who, as a college student, fell in love with Tamil to the point where he followed its lead to a PhD that facilitated his luck in studying under the wonderful tutelage of Dr. K. Paramashivam, a man whose decades not only of scholarship, but also mentoring of so many scholars from India and abroad makes him a legend. I'm very pleased to present this book, which mentions KP, as we called him, which mentions KP with great affection in the preface, as I myself was also once KP's student, in fact, in his very last batch at the American Institute of Indian Studies. I think I speak for all of us who had contact with him in saying that we are deeply grateful. He is a figure who will always be missed, especially since he left this world so early. But he is also a person who lives on in the work and lives of people who in turn have made contributions to the fields of South Asian and Tamil studies. I want to add here that as part of my felicitation for the Institute on its day of commemoration, I applaud its incorporation of Tamil scholars from the US and Europe and its acknowledgement of how these scholars have contributed to the field. The book that is being launched today is a recent example of the contributions of American scholars and also of their extraordinary and unique relationships with the land of Tamil and its literature. This book, The Story, the Temple, or Koil Puranam, marks a return for John Loud of his love for Tamil, having left the academy and also having left his translation project for many years. Life takes us down many roads and sometimes carries us away from the things that we love, but sometimes it also carries us back. And in 2017, Loud resumed his work, visiting India for the first time in many years, visiting his wonderful tutor, Ananda Nataraj Dikshitar, and resuming work on translating this early 14th century text by Umapati Shivacharyar, an important theologian of the Saiva Siddhanta school and also a priest in the Chidambaram temple. This is one of his philosophical works, and because of his unique status as both philosopher and priest, Koil Puranam occupies an important place among the many texts about Hindu temples. Koil Puranam narrates one of the myth cycles that form the basis for the elaborate activities in Chidambaram, which is considered one of the 5 principal temples of Shiva in South India and the home of the god in his iconic form of Nataraj, the Lord of the Dance, a symbol from India known by devotees and other people all over the world. Koil Puranam tells how Shiva came to Chidambaram in this form and how he grants salvation to all who visit the temple. As John Loud relates in his introduction, and I quote, "Even though this poem is 800 years old, because of the status of its author as both priest and theologian, it offers the reader an intimate insight into the living heart of a temple that has been inspiring and beguiling pilgrims, devotees, and visitors over the centuries. I can personally attest to the ways in which the temple beguiles devotees, since as a dancer, I have visited Chidambaram many times and have danced repertory such as Adi Kondar that depicts in the 3-dimensional and visual mode of performance some of the stories that are elaborated here in Koil Purana. In a few weeks' time, Shivaratri takes place, a very important date on the ritual calendar of this temple, and I will be accompanying a group of Americans, some of them longtime students of American Sanskrit scholar Paul Mueller-Ortega, who come to Chidambaram annually to take part in pujas conducted by their Dikshitar and receive darshan of the Lord. Again, these are the surprising ways in which culture travels in our global world, and the surprising routes that people travel out of their affinity for places and people far away from their natal lands. I've told my friend who leads this group about Laud's book, and she was thrilled it is being released and will be available for those with deep connection to Chidambaram. I mention this here because this important book will surely enjoy a broad audience. It will give many people access to the primary stories that surround this temple and some of the philosophical ideas that continue to give it potency. Laud's translation, which worked with a few different Tamil editions of the original text, is straightforward and, while poetic, relies on contemporary language that makes the text live for today's reader. It is divided into the various sections that Umapati himself used, and the synopsis of each section in the introduction to the book makes the text easy to follow. Scholars will be pleased that the original Tamil accompanies each translated stanza. Some 70 pages of well-indexed notes follow the translation. I commend Laud's many years of work on this book and the easeful poetry with which he has made it available to many more readers. And so, it gives me pleasure to release this book on this very fitting occasion of the 43rd anniversary of the Institute. I hope that it will find its way into the hands of interested readers, both scholars and devotees, so that it both furthers the legacy of important research into Tamil language and culture, as well as inspires continued global exchanges.
கோவில் புராணம் பற்றி மிக அழகாக எல்லோரும் புரிந்து கொள்ளும் வகையில் எளிய ஆங்கிலத்தில் அது சிதம்பரத்தை அடிப்படையாக கொண்ட கோவில் புராணம் என்பதை உணர்த்திய வில்லியம் கல்லூரியின் பேராசிரியர் டாக்டர் சாந்தி பிள்ளை அவர்களுக்கு நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றி.